going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in to Brothers of Merit. I got Taylor with me. Taylor, what's going on?
What up?
Not much, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Can't complain.
You're healthy. So
We're healthy.
we'll throw that disclaimer out now. Everyone's talking about the
Good.
COVID-19, so we won't, but we just want to let you
Yeah.
guys know that we apologize for the quality, but due to social distance interviewing and Mike not being able to be here, he can't have us sounding amazing like usual.
Yeah. Yeah. The beard has. I mean, it's quite literally because we live in Maryland, illegal for us to get together and not do this remotely. Like we would actually get fined or arrested if we were to try to do this together. So, apologize, like Brandon said, for the quality of the video. But and we just talked about it right before we hopped on. But we think that it's beneficial to be a breath of fresh air, to not just necessarily talk about that. We're in good health. We pray that you guys are as well. And if you are, we pray that you're finding the joy in the situation. I know we've had a lot more family time than usual, and there's definitely some good that's coming out of this, and God can still be glorified. So that's, I think, all we really need to say.
Amen, bro. And we will move on to Al Robertson.
Woo!
Yep, he was our interview tonight. You guys are probably from Duck Commander. They knew they do the duck calls and Duck Dynasty and all, so you guys recognize him from there. But he was a amazing interview. It was very inspirational in regards to the fact that he is a pastor, and that's what he did full time for over 30 years. He's been married for 35 years, two girls, multiple grandchildren, and it was just to hear his story and his bring up his testimony. It was just amazing to hear where he came from, and it was relative. It was we sit here and we listen to stories sometimes that are not your, I would say, picture perfect Christian bring up, and he fell into that category where he struggled with things initially in his life. He went away from his family for a couple years, hit a really hard point, and then he came home. And I won't give all the details away because we always try to leave that little cliffhanger. But it was amazing just to hear what he overcame and how his family took him back in when he did so, and where he's at now because of that. And like I said, he's a pastor and he's busy now with grandchildren. So I'm really happy for him, and it was an awesome time to just sit down and talk about things besides COVID-19 and just listen to what he had to say and the advice he had to offer for all of our listeners.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's really cool. I mean, obviously, like if you watch Duck Dynasty, you know like how close the brothers and the family is, and so he's experienced um, that closeness with his actual blood brothers, which is always cool when we get that relationship, and it's not necessarily just like a me and Brandon kind of thing, like friends that are brothers. Um, and I think that it's really cool. Like when we reached out and tried to do an interview with him, he said that he was all in because of the topic and like how influential in his own life Brotherhood was and things like that. And so I think he has a lot of really really cool insights. Also, I guess kind of disclaimer, um, because of the technological situation, it was on my phone and it died halfway through. I actually am not in the last half of the interview, but
Yeah, like the 15-minute mark, Taylor just faded away. I got a text message like keep it running. At first, I'm thinking like, oh no, something's going on with his daughters or something. Like he had to bail, and then like a minute later, it's like, my phone died.
yep, yeah, I had to
But
text him from my computer, and Brandon was probably thinking like, of course it did, because I think every
yeah,
single day we text every single day, like we're talking on the phone, and it's like, oh, hold on a second, like I'll call you in like an hour, and my phone dies.
right when I can charge up and get some juice, or you send me a screenshot of something and it's like 7%, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Taylor,
I live my
like
life in
your
the
gas
red.
tank is always on E, and your phone is always the dead. It's insane.
I laugh in the face of danger.
Oh my gosh, it's too real. But I got to tell you, it was when we got into the end. You weren't there for it, Taylor, so I kind of don't want to spoil it. I want you to hear it when you listen to our episode. But he the one thing he did hit on that you have before is the presence of what a brother can be, and sometimes presence is the ministry. It's not always about just what you have to say, but it's just being there. Like when you're going through a hard time, you've said it yourself. It's basically just like shoulder to shoulder saying, "Hey, I might not know what to say, or you may not want to hear it, but I just want you to know I'm here. Like I'm here for you. I'm with you. I know it's a hard time, and it's going to be a hard time for me because I'm going to try to endure as much of it as I can as well. So he said that, and I immediately thought of you because you've said that before.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, obviously, I didn't hear the end of that, so I'll just like my like 2 cents. The first thing that came into my mind when you said that is, um, again, I think I have said this before on the podcast, but some advice that I've gotten before is literally just, if you think someone needs help but you don't know what to say or whatever, like just be there. That's the advice. Just be there. It doesn't literally. It's just, hey, like I'm here for you and I'm praying for you, and that's sometimes all you need to do. Um, it's just showing up in people's life and showing that you're not gonna run away when times get muddy. Um, and and then the other thing that I was gonna say, this is actually it's cool. This is a concept that's kind of came up in my life a couple times lately in the past couple weeks. I think God's trying to like, I guess, reteach me something, but um, the importance of like prayer for other people, like praying for a brother. Like if, for example, if Brandon's going through a tough time or whatever, um, then me as a brother, I can pray and like intercede on his behalf. Like I like if this, I can like do the heavy lifting and be like, look, I know you're going through stuff. Like you just pray for like peace and you just like try to like get, you know what I mean? Like I'll do the heavy lifting. I'll go to God on behalf. I'm gonna intercede and be like, you know what I mean? I don't know, which is like incredible. Like I can't. This is worse than I've ever been. I can't even think of a verse, let alone where it is that like backs that up. But I know it's theologically sound. Uh, but it I don't know. I think it's really really cool. Kind of bringing in that like that's literally what brotherhood's all about. When the Toby Keith would say, as the fifth the Chan, that's when it's time to show up and intercede.
Yep, and that's what I was saying. It's sometimes it's just, hey, I'm here to endure some of it
Yep,
and take it off of your shoulders from you. So that's what Brotherhood's about. That's why we do this podcast. That's why we have this ministry, is so people can realize how important it really is.
100%.
We don't want it to be that you're finding out how important it is when it's too late.
Amen.
We want you to build that firm foundation now, so that way when you are going through it, you have it, and you're not trying to find it when it's too late.
Amen.
So let's take it in,
Heck yeah.
let them listen to it, and then we will see you guys on the other side.
See you on the other side.
Alrighty, Al Robertson, how you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing good, bud. How about y'all?
We're doing well. Taylor,
What up?
what's up, guys? Quick disclaimer for everyone listening. Obviously, we're all in the COVID-19, so we're all distance interviewing. So if you guys hear a little quality issue, no big deal. So we're still going to get the good content out. And Al, again, thanks for coming on to the show. We're really appreciative. I know your time's valuable. You're really busy. So thanks again.
You're welcome, bud. I've been, this is kind of my new world. The only person that knows less than me about technology is my dad. And because he still calls a phone the little black box. So I don't know a lot, but I'm learning. And so like I'm doing a lot of remote interviews. I've learned about Zoom now. I've learned all these new things. And it's actually kind of fun, I have to admit, to kind of this whole new world where we're having to communicate this way. So I'm learning. I'm on the learning curve, which is good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it seems like we're probably going to be. We were just talking before this interview. Where the world is probably going to take that route after this. And I'm curious to see what we look like post COVID-19 because of all the social distancing, all the remote media we're doing. It's going to be interesting to say the least. So, but to get us started off, we're going to do our questions to Taylor on you. So, Taylor, you got one for him?
Yeah. So the first question, real quick, just to get the juices flowing, is going to be, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
A favorite flavor of ice cream. Well, currently I am not eating ice cream because I'm trying to lose some weight, and so right now there's very little. But my favorite flavor when I'm just letting it rip is coconut gelato.
Ooh.
which is technically not ice cream because it's better. The Italians don't know a lot of stuff better than Americans, but gelato, trust me, man, is the new way. You want gelato and you want coconut gelato. It's awesome.
And my question would be, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Any superpower? Hmm. That's interesting because I just watched Avengers with my grandkids just before we got on here, so I saw a lot of superpower displayed. I guess I would have to say it would have to be time travel,
Ooh.
because we just saw watch the end game, and the whole thing about how how all that was. But I think if that was a superpower, if you were able to go back, I mean, I think it would be interesting, not necessarily to change things, but just to like things. Cool to go back and in history, things that impacted the world, and be able to watch it. I mean, I think that'd be really cool.
That would be cool. Where would you go? Bonus Tara question, Tara. Where would be the go to?
I think one of the places that has always made, of course, the cross would be
Sure.
incredible just because it was so world changing. But I've always thought that some of the battles from World War II, if you were able to like go back and see, knowing how it all kind of ends and turns out, when we went to Omaha Beach, Dad did a movie there a couple of years ago, and just when you go there now, it just looks like this little seaside village and
Yeah.
no big deal, and you could vacation there. And then you think about what happened there, like 75 years ago, whatever it was, and you're just like, I mean, this was change the world kind of
Right.
point. So it would be really cool to see some of those moments, I think, in history.
Absolutely. It would be cool, and history is intriguing to a lot of people as well, which is another thing that makes people's minds start to play through it all. So, Al, if you could, to get right into it, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Your testimony and your bring up and your family, things like that.
Well, I'm the oldest in my family, and best looking, and a lot of other adjectives too that I won't bore your listeners with. But my wife says that I'm the best looking Robertson. But anybody that's watched Duck Dynasty or seen people in my family knows that the bar is so low that to be the best looking Robinson, to be totally honest with you, is not really that hard. I mean, you just have to shave or bathe regularly or wear deodorant. I mean, there's so little to be the best, but I still am the oldest, and so I own that. And I have a lot of fun with my brothers. Of course, whenever I've been a pastor for almost 30 years
Okay.
of my life, so I'm 55, and so most of that time has been spent in ministry. I haven't always been a senior pastor, and then I kind of flowed in and out of full time ministry, working with Duck Commander and our show, and all the things that happened. We weren't really planning on a television show, and yet it happened. Which was pretty amazing. So before that, I was just a guy who wasn't sure really what to do with my life. I had always assumed I would take over our company because my dad started from the ground floor up, and we were the labor. We didn't know about child labor laws and all that kind of stuff. I'm like 12 years old on a bandsaw, with this blade like 3 inches from my thumbs, for hours at a time. And so I look back on it, and just we were just doing what we had to build our business.
Sure.
And so I always figured I would take it over. I was the oldest, and it didn't work out that way. I mean, God had other plans for me. I wound up in ministry. Turned out to be Willie's job, who was the third in line, but he had the kind of the business sense, and really more importantly, he had a wife who had a trust fund. So, when you're talking about future business, the trust fund wife can sometimes be your biggest proponent, for going
Noted.
forward. But yeah, so most of my life was built around that. When I was I kind of had the only time I really kind of spaced out was when I was a teenager. Mom and dad, obviously, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And so, dad, now people see him like, oh man, Phil Robertson's like he's John the Baptist, But the guy I knew for the first 10 years of my life was just a guy just struggling with life and alcohol and a lot of other problems. And so, when he turned around and mom turned around, it really changed our life. And so I had been a good kid. I took care of my brothers. Mom could depend on me. I was there for her. And then something happened. I just kind of went dark. I mean, like everything should have been great. I was about 14 years old. Mom and dad are Christians now. We got great church, great youth ministry. It was the church I would later pastor for my whole career. And but I just something I did like a lot of kids did. I call myself a double secret agent. I was right there. I was on the third row. I was singing the songs. I looked like everything was great, but inside it wasn't great. And I was thinking about partying all weekend and what I could do to, you know, do this with that girl and do that with that one. And so I was just dark. I was a wolf among sheep.
Mm,
And so I just finally left. Double secret agents at some point have to pick a side. And
mm,
that's what I did. And so basically, I chose to follow the path of evil one. Dad sat me down one day and said, Al, you got a choice. You can change or you can leave. And I thought that was really rich coming from him because he had been such a heathen. And so I was just kind of like an angry teenager and I just was in full rebellion. So I just graduated high school. I went to, of all places, to find myself New Orleans, Louisiana. And if you've ever been there, you know that all you find there, if you're not grounded, is a lot of trouble.
yeah.
So that's what happened to me. And I almost got killed down there because I was messing around with another man's wife. And he tried to kill me one day. And it really, sometimes I always say that you have to be caught to be taught. And that's what happened to me that day. A crowbar sent me on the narrow path uh,
Sheesh.
to life. And so I survived that whole deal. But also, as I was sitting there, I'm bleeding, I'm bloodied, and all this stuff. And I thought, you know what? If this is what's going to be your life, I was 18 years old, and I thought, you're not going to see 19. I mean, it had gotten that pathetic. And so I really was just like the kid in Luke 15. I was that prodigal son who was away from his family, who wanted to go home and couldn't figure out how to get there. And so finally, there was a police officer there that was at this whole scene, and that's a long story, but he basically just kind of showed me the path, which is why I love first responders so much now. I do anything they ask me to do with all this fame and stuff we have now because I'm like, these guys, I mean, there was one of them one day that saw an opportunity and took the most of it. And so he put me on the straight and narrow. And I went home and I had my whole speech worked out. I was like, I know I can't be trusted, blah, blah, blah. I was expecting this whole speech from Dad because I hadn't talked to Dad in 2 years. And when I get out of the car, they just come out and meet me
Mm.
at the car and they just hugged me and it was just like Luke 15. They were the father, and mom was crying and I was crying and Dad just said, Al, we got duck calls to build. And that was it. That was my way back in. There was no like list of sins, no list
Yeah.
of grievances, the bad time we had parted. And so just like the story that night, we killed a fattened catfish and had a celebration because the lost son had come home. So but from that point forward, from 18 till sitting here tonight talking to you guys, I have been 100% on board with Jesus, and I've never looked back. From that decision. So, I get it. So when I pastored all those years, I wanted our church to be a church that welcomed people back or welcome people home. And so that's been my philosophy on ministry my whole life, and I know why because it comes out of my own life.
That's incredible. I mean, you couldn't script that to look any more like the prodigal son, and I mean, I
That's
love
right.
that.
And
That's right.
what I really enjoyed from your story was the fact that your parents did nothing but just accept you at that moment. They didn't ask questions. They didn't argue. They didn't fight. They just hugged you. And I love how your dad said, "We got duck calls to build." Like, come on, son. Like, it's okay.
That's right.
That
Welcome
that
back.
that's amazing.
And what's funny is now I'm 55 and Dad is 7. He'll be 74 next month, and we're really tight, and like we work together, and we do a podcast together, and now I produce a show that he's doing, and so like now we're like close friends as adults. And I think about that day. I mean, if he had made that a really terrible homecoming, we may have never gotten past that. We had never built that relationship, and so all these years now I mean, I'm a grandfather, he's a great grandfather. He baptized my granddaughter a few
Yeah,
weeks ago in our hot tub, and I mean, I thought about it, he was baptizing his great granddaughter,
yeah,
and what an honor to have that sort of legacy for that many generations, which was really, really awesome.
I love that. First off, side note, I knew that because I listened to the same podcast. Love the podcast. Highly,
Awesome.
highly recommend it. But also, I'm actually glad that you brought that up because I was gonna transition into then. So since that happened from 19,
obviously your family and like your brothers, but also your dad world of like brotherhood, like we like to talk about it, became someone that was that figure for you, that like where you could have brotherhood and helped you get back on the narrow, like you said, and then lead a life of ministry and ministering other people. So can you speak a little to what that relationship and what that brotherhood meant to you turning your life around?
Well, obviously, it was everything. I think that that's probably the greatest thing missing in our current culture, which is why I love what you guys are doing, which is why I wanted to be, on your podcast because, it takes men to sharpen men. I
Mm.
mean, when the Bible talks about iron sharpening iron, and look, we love our women. I mean, I've got a wife of 35 years. I've got my daughters. I got my granddaughters. Women are awesome. I mean, they're everything for us, but it takes men to sharpen you as a man. And so it takes mentors, it takes brothers, it takes that sort of fierce in the fight. That's why the military, our American military has always been so strong because we always understood brotherhood. We understood what it takes for men to be in a
Yep.
fight together. And I realize now there are women, that have joined that ranks, but I'm saying we understand the process. And so
Sure.
that's what it is. And when you think about what we're doing as Christians as being spiritual warfare, so you basically have to have this approach. You've got to decide that we're in this together. And I think there's something about men in particular as spiritual men of God that we see that and we understand that. And so that's what my dad has been to me. That's what my brothers are to this day. We're very close knit. Now we fight, but look, brothers fight. That's what they do. They don't always get along, but then they're always there for each other at the same time. And I think that's what really, that was kind of the success of Duck Dynasty, to be honest with you, was the idea
Mm.
that at the end of the day, family always comes together. So those influences had a big influence on my life. And the guy that converted my dad and my mom, the one that led them to Christ, wound up by God's grace being my mentor. Because he was not, by the time I worked with him, he was already in his like 60s and 70s. But he was a leader in our church, and so I spent 15 years under this man's teaching and leading, and it just made a huge impact on my life, and it helped me. And I've been able to pay that forward to other people. I went to a summer camp, and Lisa and I did our testimony one day, and this 18-year-old kid came up to me afterwards, and he said, "Mr. Allen, could I talk to you?" And I said, "Well, sure." So we went over and sat down under a tree, and he told me a story, and it was a lot like my story. Same thing. He had gotten into it with his girlfriend and women and drinking and running around, and his parents had actually brought him to the camp, and he didn't know it, but his mom had packed the bag, and he thought they were just dropping off his sister. Well, when they all got out, and they started taking up everybody's cell phones from all the teenagers, and they said, "Okay, Trace, give me your cell phone." And he was like, "I'm not staying." And he looks at the parents, and they had the suitcase, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're staying." So that's how we wound up at this camp. And so, like, he's at first he's like mad and miserable and fighting it. But the only reason they came, they're from Kansas. The only reason they came to Louisiana was because of the show. They wanted to meet Sadie and John Luke. Well, then here I am coming out, me and Lisa, to do our testimony. So this is by day 4. Well, by now he's kind of settled into the routine and realizing that, well, maybe this isn't so bad. And then I
Right.
give my testimony, my story that I just told you guys. And then he's like, "That's my story."
Right.
And so it was obvious that I was there for him that day. And so
Mhm.
I shared Jesus with him under that tree, and he told me what I was going on in his life. And right then he was like, "You know what? I need to change. I need to turn my life around." So I said, "Well, look, keep listening to these folks out here." And I gave him my cell number. I said, "When you get back to Kansas, reach out to me." Well, it was by the end of the week, they had a big baptismal service at the end. He called me and said, "Hey, Mr. Allen, I'm going to get baptized on Friday. Will you come out
Wow.
and do it?" And I said, "I'd be honored to." And so, and I've mentored him ever since. And so, that's what happens. You pay it forward. People do it for you, and then you pay it forward to the next generation. That's what this whole thing is about. It's what you guys are about. It's what I'm about.
I love it.
Absolutely. We were one of my favorite episodes that we've recorded, and over the 40 plus we've done, even more than that, 50 plus, is a mentoring episode from Taylor's really good friend that he went to school with, and he was his dorm room and dorm rate buddy and all. And it's amazing what mentoring can do. And he explained how you should be mentored by somebody and be mentoring somebody at the same time. So you're pouring into and also being poured into by someone else. And it's a constant revolving door. We think that's a paramount part of the brotherhood process in general.
I've met Ken Harrison, who's the new CEO of Promise Keepers. I don't know if you guys knew, but they're fixing to crank Promise Keepers back up. And, they've really changed their whole approach because instead of just being event driven, um, they're really working on mentoring and on small groups and on how that it can be an organic men's ministry around the country. They're just going to do one big event every year and then go from there. So the message is going everywhere that you guys are talking about. More than even some old ministries like that are retooling and saying, we got to make it personal and we got to make it man to man.
Yep, absolutely. Al, can you hit a little bit on your family? I know you said you had a wife of 30 plus years and you had two daughters, I believe it is.
That's right. I've been married 35 years to Lisa, and then I've got two daughters, Anna and Alex, and they're now 33 and 31, and then they each have three, so I have six grandkids. And so through this coronavirus thing, for almost the whole 3 weeks since this whole thing has started, we've been down on the beach with my grandkids coming and going. I go back home and record podcasts and do my church stuff, and then my wife, she's stationed down here because she loves the beach. And so we figure if we're gonna be quarantined, you might as well have a good view, is our view of it. So we're social distancing, but at the same time, we're doing a lot of ministry. And we actually had a film crew in here a couple of days ago, two guys from Atlanta. And when they came in, I said, "Well, I'm not going to touch you guys. And the first thing you got to do is come over here and sanitize your hands before we move forward." I thought, man, this is funny how we're doing ministry now. But yeah, so my family, obviously, and everybody lives close. We live basically in a compound together in West Monroe. I have both daughters within 100 feet of my house, and all my grandkids, and it's really great. I mean, that's just kind of the way we live our lives there in West Monroe. And Willie's got his little empire there. Most of his kids are coming back. Sadie's fixing to build a house there and move back, and so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and along the way, you became a pastor, and you've been at that same church your entire career. Is that correct?
That's right. I was working for Duck Commander and going to college, and then Lisa and I got married, and that was after I kind of came back and I reconnected with her. I'd kind of broken her heart before I left town, and I was just a terrible person. When I came back, I was a new Christian, and so I looked her up because I knew she was crazy about me, and we've been together ever since. And I wanted a woman who I knew would love me no matter what, and she was that kind of woman, and so she came on board. We had some struggles. We had a lot of, we call them suitcases full of stuff we kind of shoved in the closet of our marriage and thought we wouldn't have to deal with them, but we did. But through the whole process, it worked out well, and we were able to now tell our story. We do a lot of pro life stuff around the country because abortion is part of our testimony, unfortunately for her. And but we've used everything that's happened as a way to help people find healing and hope. It's kind of been our whole mission now, and all that was anchored out of our local church that I was a pastor at all those years. I haven't been working there full time for about 7 years, but I still preach for free. So I tell them all the time now, you can't fire me because I'm not making, you're not paying me anything. And I actually feel a lot freer now. I can, it's now like I can like preach what I don't have to worry about offending anybody. I just lay it out there. So I've been doing that for a few months now, and it's been fun to do that and kind of head up our preaching ministry with a few other guys. So
Okay. Now, what made you feel called to becoming a pastor?
It's funny because most people have a really cool story about that, but I really don't. I say that Jason and I both got kind of dragged in by our, we didn't want to go to seminary. We were like, we fought it hard because we thought, to be honest with you, our church had a seminary and they graduated about 800 guys over 25 years they
Wow.
were looking. And we were one of the last crew to go through. But we had seen preaching students for like 15 years, and they seemed kind of weird. And I don't know. They were just guys that I don't know. They were guys I was like, I don't know. I want to be like that. So when they asked us, they were basically recruiting us to come to school. And we were working for the company. We weren't making any money. I mean, the duck call business was really slow. It was the mid 80s. And we were trying our best. I was newly married. Jason just got out of high school. And so they were recruiting us pretty heavy. And I just didn't want to go. So we, like a whole year, we battled this thing. Finally, we went, and I just thought, you know what? I'm never going to work in ministry, but I would love to learn the Bible for 2 years. And, we had a good enough deal working for Dad part time while we were going to school that I could basically support my family while I was doing it. And so I said, let's just go learn some Bible. It'll help us in the long run. But even when I graduated, I never really saw myself doing it full time. And Jace didn't either. I mean, he was just like, he and Missy got married right when he graduated, and so he worked for the church part time. We were both interns for a couple of years. But then, you know what? The more I did it, the more I thought, this is what I should be doing. So I kind of grew into my calling, and it was probably at about the 6 year mark. I said, you know what? This is what I need to be doing. And so that's what changed for me. And then after that, I was like, it felt like what I should be doing the whole time.
Wow. And then you did that up until the TV show started time frame?
Yeah, so the show started filming like in 2011, 2012. And basically, I mean, Willie, I was on another show that the family was doing called Benelli Presents Duck Commander, and it was on the Outdoor Channel. And so it was a hunting show, but it was the kind of reality elements. And so Lisa and I were featured on the show, and the church was on there too. But it was really low budget production and not a big deal, and it was easy for us to do. But when this all of a sudden this huge next thing comes in, this is big time now. And they were like, well, if you want to be on the show, you've got to like be here all the time, filming 6 days a week and all that. And I thought, well, I can't do that and do ministry. Everybody else worked for the company, so they could kind of make it work. So Lisa and I said, well, we're out. I just didn't realize the commitment it was going to take. And so that explained why we weren't on the first 3 seasons. And then we kind of came in at season 4, and that's when I left my church work, crossed over back to Duck Commander. And ironically, most people don't know this, probably the first 3 years when we were filming on the show, we were helping run the company because they were also busy filming the show about the company. They couldn't actually run the company.
Right,
So
right.
he said I stepped in and basically we're doing all these, advertising deals and all the new stuff that was happening, and we were having all this, franchising and other stuff we'd never dealt with before. So we were kind of on the learning curve of the next thing that would happen for the company. And so that's kind of what we were doing and started putting this on the show. Then we kind of built our own platform in terms of our story. And like I was telling you, we wrote a couple of books. I did a devotional book. And then all of a sudden it just kind of took off, and we kind of had our own platform to do ministry. So,
Right. Now, that kind of transitions me towards the end of our interviews. We always ask everyone's, what do you think and what have you encountered in Brotherhood and what could you offer to the other guys listening and all? And with you surrounded by your brothers and growing up and the things you've been through, what advice could you give to our listeners in regards to brotherhood and having, whether it be your blood brothers or just some of your close friends? What have you encountered along the way or seen, even as a pastor? Because you have both lenses. You have a pastor and you have yourself and your experiences. What could you offer to our listeners and tell them about your advice?
well, I think you've always got to seek to grow. I mean, if you're not seeking to grow as a man of God, then you're gonna die. You're gonna get complacent, and then Satan's gonna move in, and you're gonna get stagnant, and then your family's gonna suffer. Everything you're trying to do suffers. So you've always got to keep that zeal for growth. And you guys mentioned about watching our podcast. And our podcast has grown me, and it really is a brotherhood podcast. The other day I found out 70% of our audience are men who are 30 and under. And so I had no idea that's who was watching our show, but I got so excited about that. I was like, that's who I want to be impacting. And so when they came to us from Blaze TV and they said, we want you guys to do a podcast. And then they said, can you make it spiritual? I was like, can we make it spiritual? That's who we are. That's what we do. And so
Absolutely.
here's this political, conservative political platform that says we want a biblical podcast. So that's why we teach the Bible on the podcast. And so how that relates to your question is, as brothers in Christ, we have to always spur one another on to good deeds and to good things. And so for that to happen, your audience and my audience and me always have to remember to never stop studying and growing on how I can be a better man of God. You just don't go never get stagnant, because look, as the phases of your life come along, you get married, You start having kids. Of course, your time restraints are different, but you never want to stop growing during that whole process. And then what happens is you look up one day and you're my age, you're 55 years old, and you got your grandkids coming in and saying, "Hey, Pop, can you tell me about, I'm thinking about getting baptized. Can you talk to me about that in the Bible?" I look at that and realize like God has grown me for these moments all the way through as I've been willing to be grown. So you never want to stop. And look, when you see a brother, when you see a man down, you got to try to get up. It's just like a brother who's hurt, or if you're in the military like you are, you're on the battlefield, someone's hurt. We don't leave them behind. We go and we help them through the process. So those close friends in your life that mean that much to you, when they're going through a tough time, you go be with them. Because sometimes it's the ministry of presence can help them as much as anything else. Just to know that I'm going through this with somebody else. Lisa and I had a major meltdown in our marriage at about the 15-year mark. And John Godwin, who's on the show, Godwin, everybody thinks he's kind of a goofy guy on the show, but that man has some serious heart, and he was my guy. He was my guy that just listened when I needed to rail and rant and try to figure out what was going to happen and was my marriage going to make it. He just listened and he was there for me. I told him many through the years, that was 20 years ago. I said, John, you were the guy who listened, and I had to have you there. So that may be your role in relationships and friendships and brotherhood. But whatever it is, the talker, the listener, the whatever, you do it together.
Absolutely, and it's. I love what you were saying. How it's consistent. It's something that constantly has to keep growing, and you have to keep working on. And sometimes I feel like men think they've not achieved it all, but they've gotten to that like plateau where they feel like, ah, well, I've experienced it all, or I've seen or done it. But just when you think you have, Satan comes along and throws another curveball, and then you're stuck again with something left. So having a brother to walk alongside, and just you said the presence is the ministry alone. Sometimes that's all you need. It's just someone to know that hey, he's there with me. You don't gotta say much, but just knowing you're there, like that's awesome. Al, thanks again. I can't, we can't thank you enough. Taylor had some technical difficulties throughout the interview, so he faded out. But thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I know. I was just waiting for some huge, great revelation from Taylor. I mean, I just thought he's really going to come in any moment with this earth-shattering thing, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared from my screen. So I guess, Brandon, you were the guy. You carried the show today, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, Taylor, because of the military and the fire department and all, Taylor has plugged in for me a few times, when I
Yeah.
couldn't be there. So I had to return it back. But it was easy listening to you talk. I mean, your story is amazing, and how just what you've been through, and how you turned, and then had took that Christ-centered focus and just walked away through life. And you became a pastor, which I think is amazing. Being in the chaplain corps right now in the Air Force, I'm kind of thinking about that route. So I'm finished up my bachelor's of religion, and then I'll decide on seminary. So I'm kind of in your
Yeah.
steps. Where do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? So listening to you and giving that advice was awesome.
Well, any of your listeners, if you my website, mine Lisa's is called alandlisarobertson.com. All one big long thing, alandlisarobertson.com. And it's got all our resources on there. We do a lot of blogs and stuff. It's mostly aimed at marriage stuff, but it's also some stuff about personal growth too. So if anybody wants any of the stuff we've written or done, that's a good place to go look to find it.
Absolutely. What we'll do is on our website and also in the show description, we'll attach your website and also your podcast so people can reach out, because I'm sure your social media platforms or whatever are attached to them, so people can find you and reach out to you.
And I appreciate you guys listening to ours, and you doing yours, man. I mean, and look, you're the guy I'm talking about. You're the first responder, you're military. You're the guy that has an opportunity to be on the front lines of where people struggle the most. So I just want to encourage you, as my brother in Christ, to continue on doing what you're doing. And look, you're going to be ministering to people, whether you're ever a pastor or not. You're going to be pastoring and leading people because you're around people that need you in the most dire of times. So I just want to encourage you that and stay safe during all this crazy Corona time.
It's keeping me busy for sure on both ends, military and fire department. So, but I appreciate that, and I tell you the best thing that's happened to me is joining the chaplain corps of the Air Force, because I can still serve in the military, but I can still serve God and serve his children, and I'm loving every minute of the chaplain corps because it's just caring for people. You know what I mean? And it's an amazing job. So I'm loving every minute of it.
That's awesome.
So Al, thanks again. We can't we can't thank you enough, and it's been a great interview. And I'm sure Taylor would say the same if he was here, minus his technical difficulties.
Well, tell him I said hello, and you guys stay safe.
Absolutely, sir. Thanks again. All right, so there you have it, guys. There was Al Robertson's interview. Taylor, what'd you think of that? Well, the
Well, the first
last like
I loved.
right.
Second half, I'm sure I will love. I guess time of listening, I can say with confidence, I think I loved it. But that's like time travel. I haven't necessarily listened to it yet as of time of recording. Um, but I mean, it was honestly like this was probably the first one where, like, when he picked up the phone and he like showed up on the computer, it was like, holy smokes! Like face to a name, like
Hey,
I've
hey, Al.
whoa. So which is just awesome and just honored that he came on. I don't say that for any other reason other than saying I'm just absolutely honored to have him be a part of what God's doing here. Um, but yeah, so I loved everything he had to say, and I was blown away. I mean, like I said in there, you literally couldn't have in his story, you couldn't have scripted that to look more like the prodigal son, from how he acted to Phil's response. So I loved it. Super
Yeah.
impactful.
And I really enjoyed the fact that it was a police officer that he said is the one that
100%.
laid down some words of encouragement, and I think the word is what he laid on him, and
Yep.
I like that. It says another thing for first responders um, that even when times are tough, if they're
Mhm.
feeling called to it or they're feeling that nudge, as we've talked about in past episodes, like
Yep.
they still follow through with that. So next week we have you and I. We dug into the Bible. We talked about
Yeah.
Job. We read through the first chapter. Was it first two or first?
I think it was just the
Yeah, I
first
think it was the
chapter.
first one. Um, and that was a really good one. That by far, I loved it. So you guys stay tuned. It's
Yeah.
in the Old Testament, so if you guys aren't Old Testament fans, just wake up a little bit, push through it. I know you'll be all right.
No, it was great.
It's
I mean,
good stuff.
yeah, I mean, you've said it. I mean, this is again time travel. We recorded this a couple weeks ago as kind of like an evergreen episode whenever anything like a world pandemic happened and we couldn't we couldn't get together,
Oh yeah, right.
which is pretty cool actually. Like that's because that actually was like what we said. It was like, oh, let's just like we have time. It was after an interview we finished early, and so we were like, let's just do one that can kind of just go whenever we need it schedule wise, just in case something tragic happens.
Oh, and it tragedy has struck.
uh, and God showed up. So by having us, not by having COVID-19, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And, but so I loved it. Honestly, like we've talked about it a lot since then. Is my hope getting that? Sorry for the rambling. We've talked about it a lot since then. That was 100% my favorite episode that we've ever done. Just the two of us. Just I mean the content. Because it wasn't the two of us. It was literally like Job and the Lord brought the content, and
Yep.
it fire.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah.
So tune in
So,
next week.
yep. And until then, you guys be safe. Use hand sanitizer. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Don't
Social,
touch your face, people.
don't leave your house. Guard your kids. Guard your wife. No, I'm just kidding. All right, y'all. Have a good one.
See ya.
See ya.